There are days when you wake up and you don't want to be happy. You don't want to put on the mask of positivity. You don't want to chase the endless race of productivity. And you don't want to force a smile that doesn't belong to you. On those days, all you want is to sit in your own quiet sorrow. You want to feel the weight of sadness without interruption, without someone trying to cheer you up, without the world demanding you be strong again. And somewhere deep inside, that very desire to be sad confuses you. Why would a human being crave sorrow when everything around us is designed to pursue happiness? Melancholy is not simply sadness. It is not the sharp sting of heartbreak, nor the raw wound of grief. It is something softer, slower, heavier, almost poetic. It is a longing for a sadness that feels safe, as if by sinking into it, you are finally allowed to put down the armor you've been wearing for years. Many people fear melancholy because they mistake it for weakness. But in truth, melancholy is often a hidden form of strength. It is the body and mind whispering that it is finally safe to release what was suppressed for too long. Think about it. So much of our childhood is built not on what happened, but on what didn't happen. The love that wasn't given, the words that weren't spoken, the comfort we never received when we needed it most. As children, when those needs are ignored, we do not stop needing them, we simply bury them. We tell ourselves stories like, "I'm fine," or "I don't need anyone," but those stories are lies we tell to survive. And eventually those buried longings resurface, not as rage, not as joy, but as melancholy, the soft ache of everything we didn't get to feel when we were young. This is why melancholy often shows up when life seems fine. When nothing catastrophic is happening, when we are supposed to feel okay, but instead we feel a subtle sadness wrapping itself around us. It is because our body finally has the silence, the safety, and the stillness to say, now it's time to remember what we lost. Melancholy is the mind's way of creating space for tears that were delayed, for mourning that was postponed, for grief that was never given permission to breathe. Psychologists sometimes describe this as an emotional backlog. When we are children, we are too small to process the vastness of disappointment or abandonment, so we push it down. We distract ourselves, we adapt, but that backlog does not disappear. It waits, and in adulthood, melancholy becomes the language of that waiting. It is the desire to be sad because we are finally strong enough to confront what once would have broken us. But let's be honest, most of us were never taught to sit with melancholy. We were taught to escape it. Growing up, how often did you hear phrases like, "Don't cry," "Cheer up," "Be strong," or "Other people have it worse"? These messages teach us to silence our own sorrow. They condition us to believe that sadness is shameful, that vulnerability is weakness, that tears are a burden, and so we grow up performing happiness while secretly yearning for the quiet intimacy of sadness. The truth is, sadness is not an enemy of life. Sadness is a mirror of life's depth. Melancholy allows us to feel the weight of time, the beauty of fragility, the tenderness of impermanence. When you sit in melancholy, you are not broken. You are profoundly human. You are touching the very essence of what it means to exist, the ability to hold joy and sorrow in the same heart, sometimes at the same time. There's an interesting psychological phenomenon worth mentioning here. When people suppress sadness for long periods, their nervous system becomes fatigued. They spend years forcing themselves to appear okay, to smile when they want to cry, to move forward when they long to pause. Over time, this creates exhaustion, the exhaustion of always being strong. And so, melancholy emerges almost like a rebellion against this constant performance. It says, enough. You don't have to carry the weight anymore. Let yourself feel. That's why so many people describe melancholy as strangely comforting. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't scream at you. It simply sits beside you like a quiet companion, inviting you to release your pain. Crying in melancholy is not the same as crying in despair. Despair feels like drowning, but melancholy feels like cleansing, like washing away the dust of years gone by. And yet, our culture rarely gives permission for this kind of sadness. We celebrate happiness, ambition, productivity, but we do not celebrate the human need to mourn the unlived lives within us. We forget that letting go often requires tears. Just as the sky must rain to clear the air, the human heart must cry to heal its unseen wounds. Let's bring this closer to something deeply relatable. Imagine a child who always tried to be the strong one in their family. Maybe their parents were distracted, maybe they were struggling, maybe they simply didn't notice how much that child needed to be held. That child grows up believing strength means silence. They learn to never complain, never cry, never need. But years later, as an adult, that same person might find themselves overwhelmed by a strange sadness that arrives in quiet moments. That sadness is not random. It is the child within them finally whispering, "I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be comforted. I wanted to be allowed to break down too." Melancholy, then, is not simply a desire to be sad. It is a desire to finally be real, to feel without censoring, to express without apology, to allow the vulnerability that was denied for so long. It is the body's way of reclaiming the tears that never had permission to fall. Some might say, but why dwell in sadness when you can just move on? And the answer is because moving on without feeling is not moving on. It's pretending. Healing is not about erasing sorrow. It's about integrating it. Melancholy teaches us that sadness has a place in the human experience, that allowing yourself to be weak, even just for a moment, is not failure but freedom. There is even a spiritual dimension to melancholy. Throughout history, poets, artists, and philosophers have written about this bittersweet longing. They describe it as a doorway to beauty, as if sorrow sharpens our vision of the world. When you sit in melancholy, you begin to notice the smallest details, the sound of rain against a window, the way sunlight lingers on an empty street, the silence of a room that holds too many memories. Melancholy slows us down, reconnects us with time, and reminds us that life is not just about the pursuit of joy, but also about the depth of feeling. In fact, research shows that allowing ourselves to experience sadness, rather than avoiding it, increases resilience. People who can embrace their melancholy often report feeling more connected to others, more empathetic, and more creative. It is as if by entering the shadow of our own sorrow, we open our hearts to the sorrow of others, and through that, discover a deeper sense of belonging. And maybe that's the hidden beauty of melancholy. It is not just about personal healing, it is about human connection. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give permission for others to do the same. When we admit, "Yes, I too feel the desire to be sad sometimes," we break the illusion that everyone else is fine and only we are struggling. Melancholy is not isolation, it is invitation. It says, "Come sit with me in this quiet place and let us remember what it means to be human together." So the next time you feel that soft heaviness in your chest, that unexplainable longing for sadness, do not run from it. Do not silence it with noise or numb it with distractions. Sit with it. Listen. Because that desire to be sad is not weakness. It is your inner self finally asking to be heard. The strange thing about melancholy is that it often visits when life looks stable on the outside. You may have a steady job, relationships that seem fine, and no immediate crisis demanding your attention. Yet in the quiet moments, when the noise fades, when you're alone in your room, when there are no distractions left, you feel it creeping in. A tender sadness, a soft ache, almost like a shadow sitting beside you. And instead of pushing it away, you almost want to lean into it. You want to stay there, as though the sadness itself holds something sacred. That sacredness comes from truth. For so long, many of us have lived behind masks. Masks of confidence, of productivity, of strength. But melancholy asks us to take the mask off, to show our raw face to ourselves. It says, stop pretending you're invincible. Stop pretending you were never hurt. Let yourself admit the losses you've carried in silence. And in that way, melancholy is not an enemy to life. It is a companion guiding us back to honesty. It is important to see that this desire to be sad is not destructive. It is not a wish to collapse permanently. It is a longing for release. Think of it like holding your breath underwater. You can force yourself to hold it for a long time, but eventually your body will demand air. In the same way, you can hold in your pain, You can hold in your tears, you can hold in your unspoken needs, but eventually your soul demands release. Melancholy is the exhale after years of holding your breath. Let's bring this back to childhood, because so much of melancholy has roots there. Imagine the child who always had to be mature before their time. Maybe their parents leaned on them for support. Maybe they were never allowed to be soft, never allowed to cry, never allowed to fail. That child learns early that love must be earned through strength, not vulnerability. So they grow up carrying invisible weight, and decades later, when life finally slows down, melancholy arrives as the gentle rebellion of that inner child. It whispers, "I wanted to be held. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to rest." When you feel the desire to be sad, it is often your younger self asking for the comfort they never received. It is the longing to cry out for the love that should have been there but wasn't. To release the anger, the loneliness, the unmet needs that were buried in silence. This is why melancholy can feel almost nostalgic. It carries echoes of a time when you needed something deeply and were told you couldn't ask for it. Psychologists often speak of the inner child, but this is not just theory. Neurologically, the memories of emotional neglect and unprocessed trauma remain alive in the nervous system. They don't vanish because we grow older. Instead, they hide, waiting for a moment of safety. Melancholy is often that moment. It is your nervous system saying, now you are strong enough to feel what once overwhelmed you. Now you are ready to mourn what was missing. And mourning is essential to healing. Without mourning, the past remains stuck inside us. We keep living the same patterns, searching for validation in the wrong places, endlessly proving ourselves because we never felt enough. Melancholy is the doorway to breaking that cycle. By allowing ourselves to sit in sadness, by letting the tears fall, we create space for renewal. We are no longer running from our past. We are embracing it, acknowledging it, and letting it go. There's also something beautifully human about how melancholy connects us to art, music, and poetry. Have you ever wondered why we are drawn to sad songs? Why films that make us cry often feel more memorable than films that make us laugh? It's because sadness brings us closer to authenticity. Happiness can sometimes feel superficial, but sadness feels honest. When we listen to a melancholic song, we hear our own hidden voice echoed back to us. When we cry at a story, we recognize our own longing inside it. This is why art has always been tied to melancholy. It gives us a safe place to feel the things we suppress in daily life. Even in spiritual traditions, melancholy has often been seen as a kind of wisdom. Ancient writers described it as the sorrow that gives birth to compassion, because when you have sat in your own sadness, you learn to recognize it in others. You notice the heaviness in their voice, the quiet in their eyes, and instead of rushing to fix them or silence them, you can sit with them. You can say, without words, "I know this place too." In that way, melancholy deepens empathy. It turns our private sorrow into a bridge of human connection. But we must also be careful. There is a difference between melancholy and despair. Melancholy is the desire to be sad so that you can release, so that you can heal, so that you can touch the depth of life. Despair, on the other hand, convinces you that nothing will ever change. The key difference is that melancholy carries movement. It allows you to feel and then breathe again. Despair, by contrast, traps you. So the invitation is not to sink forever into sadness, but to use melancholy as a wave that washes over you, cleanses you, and then recedes. When you honor melancholy in this way, you discover its gifts. You realize that tears are not signs of weakness. They are signs of cleansing. That feeling sad does not mean you have failed at life. It means you are alive enough to feel its depth. That letting yourself break for a moment does not mean you are broken forever. It means you are human enough to need rest. And maybe that's what makes melancholy so profoundly healing. It allows you to admit, I am tired of being strong all the time. It gives you permission to collapse into your own arms, to nurture yourself the way no one did when you were small. It is the longing to be vulnerable, to be seen in your weakness, to stop performing and simply exist as you are. This is why, paradoxically, the desire to be sad often precedes growth, because only when we release what we've carried can we move forward lighter. Only when we mourn the love we didn't receive can we open ourselves to the love that still might come. Only when we admit our exhaustion can we discover new strength. So, the next time melancholy visits you, welcome it. Sit with it as if it were an old friend bringing news from your past. Listen to what it says. It may whisper of childhood needs, of hidden wounds, of the exhaustion of pretending. It may ask you to cry, to slow down, to let go. And though it may feel heavy, remember that heaviness is not here to crush you. It is here to free you. Because at its core, melancholy is not about sadness alone. It is about truth. It is about remembering the parts of you that were left behind. It is about giving yourself the permission to feel what you once silenced. And through that, it is about becoming whole again. So if today you feel the desire to be sad, don't fight it. Don't bury it under forced smiles or endless distractions. Sit with it, breathe with it, let it move through you, for in that sadness lies your humanity, your healing, and your hidden strength. Melancholy is not the end of joy. It is the doorway that allows joy to return, not as performance, but as something real.